Good day to each and everyone. I am Arlene Casadjo, and I'm here to talk about the pioneer of Sikolohiyang Pilipino, Mr. Virgilio Enriquez. So let's talk about the chapter 3 of Filipino psychology. Again, the Virgilio Enriquez, pioneer of Sikolohiyang Pilipino. But before we proceed, you're wondering if who is the man behind the Filipino psychology. And before we proceed deeply in our topic, let's talk about a little biography of Mr. Virgilio Enriquez. So, Mr. Virgilio G. Enriquez, or the Ama ng Sikolohiyang Pilipino, was born on November 24, 1942 at Santol, Balagtas, formerly known right now as the Bigaa, Bulacan, and he was also known as Doc E back when he was teaching in UP, or University of Philippines at Diliman, and he was also a social psychologist and again the father of Filipino psychology, or the Ama ng Sikolohiyang Pilipino, and he died on August 31st, 1994. So, Mr. Virgilio G. Enriquez was the youngest of five children of Mr. Arsenio Libiran Enriquez and Mrs. Rosario Galvez Gaspar. So, the full name of Mr. Virgilio G. Enriquez was Virgilio Gaspar Enriquez. So, now let's talk about his motivation on why he uh, wanted to discover or to study about the Filipino psychology. So Mr. Virgilio Gaspar Enriquez was trained by his father to speak the native tongue fluently since he was a child. His father would always find time to have a discussion with him in Filipino, and even with his PhD dissertation, which was written in English, he had to explain it to his father in Filipino. So actually, back when Mr. Virgilio Gaspar Enriquez was young, his parents really nurtured him and really wanted him to love the Filipino culture. And even when he was in his PhD dissertation, even though it was written in English, his father would likely wanted to explain it to him in Filipino language. As you can see, um, Mr. Virgilio Gaspar Enriquez was really um, born with the love of the culture. And for example of this is that he would ask the young Virgilio, the father of Mr. Virgilio Enriquez, would ask him to read the day's English language paper, but he would read it loud in Filipino as if it was originally written in that language. So as you can see, his father really taught him on how to love the Filipino culture, and even wanted him to really focus on the Filipino language aside from the learnings in like English like that. So Enriquez was formally initiated into psychology in 1963 when he started teaching at the University of the Philippines, or the UP, and as early as 1965 he was using the Filipino language in teaching. So Mr. Enriquez was um, teaching in UP uh, on 1963, and he was teaching psychology. And as early as 1965, he uses Filipino language in teaching. So as you can see, um, the love of the culture and the love of Filipino language, he really use it in teaching, especially in psychology. So in 1966, he left for the United States to pursue a master's, then later a doctoral degree in psychology at Northwestern University at Evanston, Illinois. So Mr. Virgilio Enriquez wanted to pursue his master's um, abroad, or in other country, and it was in Northwestern University, Illinois. And while in this foreign land, or while he was in Illinois, um, amidst the foreign theories, he watched the disenchantment of young student activists in the Philippines over the deteriorating political and social conditions of the country. So back then, this time, it was 1966, it was the reign of the Ferdinand Marcos, and he really, he was also one of the witness of how chaotic, or how how the students in UP was disenchanted about about the educational system in the Philippines back then. So the stream of nationalism, correspondence with Lagmay, the stream of nationalism was starting to have an effect on the teaching of different courses at UP. So through his correspondence with Lagmay, Enriquez learned that the matter of teaching in the Filipino language was being taken up eagerly. So he started preparing for teaching of psychology in Filipino, and had a number of discussions and arguments with friends and professors at Northwestern University such as Ernesto Cole, Lee Sucharest, and Donald Campbell. So he really witnessed how the young students, activists in the UP, um, how how are they dismayed of the political and educational system back then at that time. So Enriquez returned to the Philippines in 1971, bringing with him a wealth of Western knowledge which he did not impose on his Filipino colleagues and students. So, what made you think why Mr. Enriquez didn't impose or didn't teach his Western knowledge in back when he was in the Philippines, or um, he was studying it at the University of Illinois. And if you're wondering why he did not impose or he did not teach his Filipino students, and even his colleagues about the Western psychology, it is because um, he was he it re that uh, that idea really drove him to be more Filipino-oriented in his teaching and research in psychology. It is because he knows that Western teachings of psychology is way more different in the Filipino culture. It is because Western culture is more individualistic than the Filipino culture, which is more collectivistic. And he knows that uh, being a Filipino is not practicing, or we did not practice being individualistic like that. So that's why he was really motivated to be more Filipino oriented. And we all know that back then when he was young, his parents really taught him to love the Filipino culture and even the Filipino language. So that's why it really drove him to be more um, Filipino oriented in his teaching, and he opted not to teach the Western culture. uh, Besides, that's what he studies outside the country. So his Western education actually drove him to be more Filipino oriented again in his teaching and research in psychology. So he established the Philippine Psychology Research House, or the PPRH, which later became the Philippine Psychology Research and Training House, or now the PPRTH. And this place became home to materials on Sikolohiyang Pilipino, growing to its present size of more than 10,000 references. So as you can see, his love of the Filipino culture and his love of the Filipino culture drove him to build or to have the Sikolohiyang Filipino or Philippine psychology, and even build a Philippine psychology research house, which is very um, necessary back then. And actually, it really helps. It really helps the students of psychology students because it gives 10,000 references of psychology books like that. So it also became home to research with a Filipino perspective, as well as an abode to individuals inspired by Enriquez' enthusiasm, who eventually made their own contribution to the growth of Sikolohiyang Filipino. So as you can see, Mr. Virgilio Enriquez really made an impact in the in the field of Filipino psychology. He also inspired others to give or to make their own contribution in the name of Filipino psychology. So Mr. Enriquez became the chairman of the Department of Psychology in 1977 to 1982. So it was very long time where he became the chairman of the Department of Psychology. So he motivated students to write their papers in Filipino to discover important ethnic concepts, thus contributing to the growth of the national language. And also, he was an advisor and reader of this theses and dissertations written in Filipino in psychology, linguistics, anthropology, philosophy, and Philippine studies. So that's how Mr. Virgilio Enriquez really influenced uh, psychology students back before, and even the Filipino psychology. He made a lot of works that are very much um, very much popular, and it helps the Filipino psychology field. So let us proceed to the next slide. So Mr. Enriquez authored several publications aside from the different legacy that he made. He also authored several publications in indigenous psychology, Filipino personality, psychology of language and politics, philosophy and values, cross-cultural psychology, and Filipinolohiya, or the Philippine studies. So these are just some of the uh, pub, publications. I mean, these are just some of the authored books of Mr. Virgilio Enriquez. This list includes the Indigenous Psychology and National Consciousness of 1989, From Colonial to Liberation Psychology 1992, a chapter contribution to Blowers and Turtles of 1987, book Psychology Moving East of 1987, also, and his last publication before he passed away in 1994 is the Pagbabagong Dangal, Indigenous Psychology and Cultural Empowerment of 1994. So as you can see, um, even the even in his last years, he really wanted to publish a book that can help the Filipino and even the Filipino psychologies right now. So this was the legacy that was given to us by Mr. Virgilio Enriquez. So Mr. Virgilio Enriquez also received numerous awards during his lifetime, fellowships, scholarships, recognitions, and grants, both in the Filipinos and internationally. So as you can see, it's not just about Philippines. His works are not just in Philippines, but also it spread internationally. That's how Mr. Virgilio Enriquez really impacted the psychology society. So he made a significant contributions to the to the awareness of Sikolohiyang Filipino and Asian psychology. One of his most significant awards is the Outstanding Young Scientist of the Philippines from the National Academy of Science and Technology in 1982, and this was in recognition of his work in Sikolohiyang Filipino. So as you can see, this was a prominent award or a grandiose award, the Outstanding Young Scientist of the Philippines, and this is from the National Academy again of Science and Technology. And also, after his death, he was given a posthumous award, the National Achievement in the Social Science Award of 1997 by the National Research Council of the Philippines for outstanding contribution in the social sciences on a national level. So these are the um, grandiose or posthumous award of Mr. Virgilio G. Enriquez. So he really made an impact in the psychology society, and even to us Filipinos, he really his love of the culture, his love of the language really made him motivated to do and to deeply study about our culture. So this is Arlene, and this is my report. Thank you.